Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Game Dev London podcast. My name is Adam. You can refer to me as he, him. And I'm here today to talk about something that you've heard me talk about so many times. I'm going to be chatting about game jams. But I'm not here by myself. I am here with the wonderful Freya. Freya, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Freya, they, them, and I'm the head of 3 development at Anything World. And I'm here to talk about games jams and how we're going to be participating this year. So I'm really excited to be talking with you.
Yes, going to be good. So for those who are not aware, and if you're not aware, because I've been shouting about it for like the last 6 weeks, Global Game Jam, Global Game Jam 2023 is coming up real soon, and we are super grateful over at Game Dev London to have been sponsored by Anything World. Woo! So we've got an amazing, we've got a great partnership coming up. We've worked with Anything World in the past. We're going to be talking a little bit today about Anything World and what it does, as well as what you can use it for in terms of making games, both for the Game Jam and more generally. But we're going to focus particularly today on creativity in game jams. If you've heard me talk about game jams before, one of the things you know that is key to sort of my heart is game jams are not just the concept of make a game and go and that's kind of it, because a lot of people can very quickly get caught up in the sense of I need to make, I have to finish the game, I have to make it perfect, I have to do this, that, and the other, etc., etc. And really, game jams are this amazing kind of creative space for you to experiment, explore, and try things out and do loads of cool stuff. And I want to talk about why creativity is super important to game jams and why it's kind of the fundamental thing that goes beyond just a sense of, I want to make a game, I want to make something, etc., etc. So to start with, let's have a little chat about your experience with game jams, Freya. Have you done game jams in the past? Have that been something that you've enjoyed previously? What's your experience with game jams just generally?
Yeah, so I think the first experience I had with games jams was when I was at university. So I studied games programming at Bournemouth University for my undergraduate, and every year for the entire cohort, we got together and did games jams like multiple times a year. So the first time I did it was in first year, and this is when I barely learned how to program. I didn't really know how to do anything, so I was like, hell yeah, let's go in, let's make a game. And then we got into a team, and it was all first years because we were obviously teaming up with our friends, and we are like, okay, let's make an MMORPG pretty much.
That is the way to begin. Everyone has to start there at some point.
So we had such grand expectations. We were like, yeah, we're gonna basically make RuneScape, but like we're gonna make it in Unreal, and it's gonna have like quests and stuff, and multiple quests, and like diverging timelines, and we basically hit every single checkbox that you pretty much shouldn't do for a games jam. But we did it with so much like enthusiasm, and we pretty much like pulled an all-nighter for 2 nights, and we got absolutely nowhere. We pretty much didn't have a playable prototype at the end of it. However, we did have a lot of fun. So that was kind of my introduction to game jams. So kind of going from there, we sort of learnt lessons and then didn't learn lessons, and we sort of tried to reduce the scope next time. And we thought we were going to make like the Blair Witch Project of sort of horror games, and we made something that did technically play and had like some kind of game loop, and like we sort of had a character moving around, but then the enemy that we had pursuing the player got glitched through a tree, and then like we couldn't demo it properly. So next time we reduced the scope again and again and again, until like I think it was in third year, and we had learned like a lot through the various games jam we'd done before, and we finally got an actual playable game that looked like a game, had a game loop, and like had mechanics and stuff. And it was like, I think it's some really goofy concept. Like we had Jeff Bezos versus Greta Thunberg, like a mobile game sort of territory control sort of vibe, because we were like really into environmentalism at that time, and we had like other interests in sort of like, that was like in 2019. And we got it to work. And after just like that sort of iterative process, having a game that actually sort of felt like a proper game at the end of it was so satisfying. And because it was the same team all the way through, it was like sort of this great, and we actually managed to win the actual like #1 prize at our university in the third year.
Amazing.
So I think it's a learning experience every single games jam you do, and I think sort of you learn how to be able to build a product, like sort of you learn more and more how you can actually achieve something in that small amount of time.
Absolutely. And you hit on one of the key things I was saying before about it wasn't, when you're in the jam and you're kind of locked into it, you're thinking about the game you're making, and you get really focused in on like, I've got to make it, it's gonna be perfect, or it's gonna be fantastic, or the best thing we've ever done. And then once you've done a few game jams and you can look back and, like you said, you can speak with that kind of hindsight, and you go, actually the benefit was what we learned from each game jam, what we took into the next one, and how we changed our approach, how we changed our scope, how we changed, you know, our experience of knowing what we can do, what we can't do, etc. To get to the point where, like you said, you ended up winning the competition that your uni's kind of judging setup because you took it from. In the first place, we were like, let's make an MMORPG, which is what everyone says. Everyone has said that at some point. There's just no way around it.
It's the hubris of game developers. It's like
You
the
have-
first thing you want to go do. It's like, yeah, let's make an RPG. I'm like, it's never that simple.
you have to learn. It's like pushing the boulder up the hill. You got to try it, and then you go, oh no, I'm not doing I'm not doing this. Until you get to a point where you finally hit on something that you can make, and you go, oh, okay, we can make this. And then as your skills develop, you end up back in that trap again. You know, I've definitely. The very similar story when my first game jam was second term, my first year at uni as a computer scientist. I mean, our very first game was very small in scope. It was like, you ever played the game Kitty Cannon, where you fire the kitten at the beginning of the game and just see how far it goes?
Yeah.
We did that, but it was with a paper airplane. Our
So
game
that's a
jams,
smart move to do for your first game jam. Yeah, you guys had foresight.
a little bit. We were slightly ahead. We did. It gets worse from there. Don't worry. We did. We had the game jams we did had they had, instead of having a theme, every team got an individual set of 3 words. Had to make a game out of it, and we had sticky tape, airplane, kettle. So we made a game where you fired a paper airplane that would be blown up in the air by like kettle steam, so it would go up, but it would get wet, and the sticky tape would put back together. So you were hoping it kind of hit a combination of sticky tape and kettle, see how far it would go.
That's a cool
And
idea.
we just kept removing how much input the player had, further and further. Like in the end, it just like, okay, they press P when they're ready to fire, and that's it. And it was for our first game. We were happy. We finished it, I think, maybe. Then didn't finish in a game jam for many years. We tried to make Minecraft at one point as a horror game. That was a bad move.
Oh, yeah.
My favorite one of my favorite stories is I did so Global Game Jam 2014. It's just 2 of us, and the person that I was working with, his voice, he was a bit ill, and his voice started to go, and we hit about 24 hours in, and his voice had gone. He couldn't speak. So it was now a
Oh
game
my
jam
God.
where he couldn't tell me what he wanted to do. So he was writing it on Post-it notes. So he's just
Wow.
writing what he wants to do on Post-it notes. And we started with an overly ambitious game in a language called JavaScript. And we got 24
yeah, I know that
hours, and we had amazing networking and 1 blue square, and that's all we could manage. And we were like, no, that's it. And we restarted the game from the beginning in a different language that we were more familiar with halfway through the game jam. And we did. I can't remember, even if we didn't finish it, we definitely had something playable, which we were really happy about. But yeah, that was game jam. That was extreme game jam, like extreme ironing, extreme game jamming. You know, like game jamming on a mountain, game jamming with 1 silent partner, Post-it notes, and starting halfway through the middle. But
That's amazing.
it was good fun. But the thing is, and this is the thing I would take from game jams, is that again, it's not the stories are always, it's the stories, it's the things we learn, it's when we try to do something overly ambitious, it's the arguments we had as a team, it's where we learn a new skill. These are the things that I take away with, not necessarily the whether we actually made a game at the end of it or not. As long as it was playable, I would be happy. We've been successful in some game jams, we've lost out on some game jams, but it's more about the fact that we have over time been able to go hey, we've made something here, and did it in a short space of time. And so this kind of takes me into talking about what I want to talk today, which is kind of that key on creativity and freedom, which is that sometimes people can get very hung up in the beginning of a game jam on either it's their first idea, but they'll say something and then they stick to it and hold on to it. Sometimes their team is with them, sometimes their team is not. And people get locked into the idea that this one's either they get the sense of, oh, we have no time, we have to make it and just go, and they lose that sense of creativity, or because they've heard horror stories, or because they bind themselves to something like, oh, I want to release this game on itch or that kind of thing, which is perfectly reasonable expectation. but they bind themselves to something that they refuse to abandon, that they get stuck in this space of really not, I mean, very realistically, not having a lot of fun. What for you is kind of the importance of creativity and freedom when it comes to a game jam? And from your perspective, how do you kind of push your own creativity when taking part in game jams?
I think it's an interesting question. I think it depends a lot on your personality as well. Because I know from my personal perspective, like when I first started doing game jams, I had a lot of ideas and like I brought that to the team and without a lot of flexibility, especially the first games jam, I was like, okay, I have this great idea. And I was like, kind of wasn't really listening to what other people were saying. So I think kind of for me personally, it was about kind of taking a step back and allowing kind of this big collaborative process to take place, and then kind of seeing that actually other people had like some really cool like mechanics, some really cool ideas, some concepts that bring in, and we can like, and those can be melded together. Like I think a lot of people in their minds probably have like this sort of big idea or a concept when they come in, and they try and make it fit into the theme, and then try and get their team on board with everything that they want to achieve during the games jam. And I think unless you're doing it solo or kind of you have already know you have everybody on team, and if you're sort of picking up with like a pickup team of like programmers or artists, then I think you need to come in with like the most flexibility that you can possibly have, because everyone has ideas, and like usually the best ideas are the ones that aren't one person's anyway, I think. Because I know in the past that I think it's very easy for one person to come in and try and sort of bulldoze the rest of the team with a sort of really high concept idea that can end up being something that everyone doesn't have their full sort of inspiration or sort of work behind. And like I think basically the team works better if everyone is really committed and like inspired by the idea that you're working on. So sort of compromise is key. I think leading on from that, it's better to plan twice and code once, because you should never I found that like however much time planning, you should double it. However many concepts that you have to choose between or vote between, you should like double it. And it feels like you need to get started immediately, but if you have to recode something or scrap something halfway through, then you've already wasted like half your time. So from my experience, it's always like planning. The games jam that we've been most successful on, we spent more time planning than the ones we ended up like falling out of. Basically is kind of the lessons I've learned.
Yeah, and this is a good note, as I need to say, you can sleep during a game jam and you will be better for it. Do not
I force myself to sleep, during a game jam now.
Tank the 48 hours. It's not worth it. The closest I've ever done to doing that was I slept, I think it's 3 hours on one night and 2 hours the other night. And I was just out of my mind by the time the jam finished. And I made no better game than I did on the jams where I slept like 6 to 8 hours, like a
it should be like I treat it like a job over the weekend. That's my attitude towards it now. Like when the first year of uni, I was like, let's stay up and do it. And then all that means is you're at like it gets to like 3 a.m. There's a merge conflict on one of your branches, like, and you have to like manually pick it out, and then you're like losing your mind, and then like you end up having to go to sleep anyway. So it's like, it's just not worth it, I think.
and this is there are a lot of people who, complain about game jams for normalizing crunch, but for me, I always think that misses the point, because I think what game jams do is create an environment where when you start, you get crunch is a thing that exists in the world as a bad thing, but it exists regardless. And until you understand how you can end up in crunch, you don't know it's going to hit you, because the problem is that by the time crunch hits you, it's too late. So game jams to me have always been a really great way of explaining crunch to somebody in a relatively controlled environment, because you realize early on that, even if you're it's your first game jam ever, if you try and stay up for 48 hours, you can work the entire time. You can't. And then when you've done a few game jams, you'll realize that you can make a better game in 24 hours with over 48 hours with sleep and all those kind of things than you made the first time you tried in 48 hours, because you're better at what you were doing. And that comes down to, it's because it's not about the amount of time you put in, it's about what you're making, how well you plan it, how efficient you are, and the knowledge of your knowledge base, essentially, how well you know things. And so it's important to kind of approach it from that perspective and go planning, scheduling, and trying to come up with a game that you can make in the time that you have. The time that you have being a sensible amount of time is the way to do it. Don't think, never ever think, what's a game that I can make in 48 hours? Because A, you don't have 48 hours, because even if you think you do, things will go wrong, things will change, somebody will be at your door, you will have to sleep, and you will get to the last. And yeah, and also, no matter what happens, you'll get to the last hour and you will be screaming. That is,
Oh
I
yeah,
don't
absolutely.
apart from one game jam where a guy turned up 4 hours before the end and pulled out an amazing taxi navigation game out of nowhere that he made using Google Maps, that was very good. That was
That's really
very
good,
kind
yeah.
of like he descended to make a game and then left again. That's a separate thing.
Some kind of old god somewhere. Like,
That was amazing. Apart from that, everything goes wrong in the last hour. That is a rule of thumb. Generally
Yeah,
speaking,
I think we built our project last year. We built our project like I think 3 minutes before the deadline, and we submitted like 3 seconds before the
yep.
deadline. It was really up to the wire.
I have been there. It's so hard as somebody who runs game jams to not extend the time because I've been there so often. And for special cases, people who have had genuine issues, I'm like, okay, well, we can do this and do that. But it's yeah, you have to, not everyone's going to be as kind, and deadlines are deadlines, and this is part of the world. And that's why crunch exists, because you can't. It's the money. Was it the money, quality, and scope are the three parts of the triangle. You can't change one without changing the others. Oh no, sorry. It's quality, scope, and time. That's what it is, and then
Speed.
cost. And the cost is just it's a general overarching principle. You can have high quality. You can have two, but not three. You can have high quality, a large scope, or lots of time, but you can't, or speed, or done quickly, but you can't have all three, because something has to give somewhere, and if you have no wiggle room, then it is going to go wrong. So start with the mentality of which one you care about, and don't make it scope. Just don't make it scope.
Yeah, well, obviously in games jams, like you don't have time, which is one of the points. So like you're always going to have to like do something quickly, and so you can either like having something high quality that's small in scope is always better than having something that's like low quality with a kind of large concept, I think.
Yeah.
Which is why I always say to every team I've ever been in, it's like we need to cut out some features already straight out the bat. We should cut out features, because it's better to have something. It's better to have more time to add features at the end than it is to not have finished the core gameplay mechanics and run out of time, because it's like
Absolutely.
Yeah, just you can always add things on. You can't add things on like laterally, I think.
Yeah, and this comes back to the point about creativity again, which is that a thing that people may have heard me say before is the saying. One of my favorite sayings is necessity is the mother of invention, which here applies as the more constraints you put on yourself, the more interesting and unique thing you will create. The reason that there is a theme to Global Game Jam is if you try and think of something in a vacuum. If I just said, "Come with a brand new game," they're going, I don't know, because it's hard. It's hard to conjure things from nowhere. That's not really how the human brain is designed. So if you give a theme, so of the previous year, let's take the intermission. Was that the film? Or was that the yes. I'm going to say intermission. Oh, Waves. Let's say Waves. That was definitely one of them. Waves was a theme one year. You immediately start thinking of what are waves? What type of waves? How what radio waves and what waves in water? And bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce and bounce. The more constraints you give yourself, the actually easier it becomes to make a game, because you limit how far your brain has. You limit basically the search that your brain has to do to come up with something that fits the parameters that you give it. And a big caveat that I always recommend is it comes from a GDC talk, which is called the MVI, which is a minimum viable interaction, which is different to a minimum viable product. The idea is that come up when you're thinking about your ideas of what game you want to make and how you want it to play and all that, figure out what the absolute basic thing that a person's going to be doing is. Like basically think about cut a second of your game out into thin air, and what is the player doing at the moment? Think about if it's FIFA, they're running with the ball. If it's Elden Ring, they are dying. If it's Elden Ring, they are probably in combat or something like that. Just make that. Don't worry about the rest of it. Don't worry. Focus entirely on that interaction and build that first, and then make that be fun and exciting and interesting. And add the game loop around it, so you have to get the menu and the title screen, and you have to get to it, and then you do it, and you win or you lose, and you come out, and 36 hours will have gone by. You will have hit Sunday before you even realize it. but you might have something playable. And so yeah, I mean, it sounds from your stories as well that you've dealt with scope on many occasions.
Extensively, yeah.
Mhm.
I think yeah, for us, like what really helped was like kind of being like, as soon as we get in, we're like, okay, we need to define like what is our gameplay loop and what is our like loss condition and what is our win condition, and then on top of that, what kind of novel or sort of unique twist are we trying to show in this games jam? And it'll be like, it usually will be like something with art or like some kind of like unique game mechanic that we kind of really feel like we need to like show off and sort of, and then like how can we make sure that we get that minimum viable interaction, as you say, or product like ready and be able to showcase that kind of that mechanic that we're trying to put across for this games jam in as short time as possible and as efficiently as possible.
Yep.
Which is kind of like another thing that I always think is like, don't reinvent the wheel. If you can get the basic stuff in without having to like hand code it yourself, just do that. Like
Oh god,
especially UI and stuff,
Mhm.
like with it, like even character controllers, whatever it is. If it's not something that you're trying to build from scratch, and define what you are trying to build from scratch in terms of mechanics, being like, okay, this is something really cool that we are trying to like, this is what we're trying to make. This is the creative part. Don't get bogged down in the rest of it, because like there are ways that you can just do it like so much quicker, and it's not going to really affect, like no one's going to be looking at like if you made a fantastic like animation like blend tree or something, if you're the entire focus of your game is to be on a specific like mechanic or sort of story concept.
Yep, 100%. Like the point of the game jam is your creativity, and your creativity is the new, novel, unique, interesting thing that you've come up with, not the menu. Unless your interesting
Exactly.
thing is a fancy, interesting kind of weird menu, but even then, is it? Like, just double check, be sure, because
Is this what
the
we really want to make?
the game thing is going to be the thing that's going to be really interesting. Even if that is a UI game, that's your UI. Like, just go get a menu. Go look on, ask people in your site. Game Dev London, we're full of developers. People, you'll be able to ask people. Go to Itch, go to the Unique Asset Store, the Unreal Marketplace, wherever it is, and just be like, okay, even if it's just, I'll chuck this in for now, and I can replace it later. I will put bets on the fact that you won't replace it later because that's how game jams work. But say to yourself, I'm gonna replace this later. Have something there. It's a lot easier than to let people get to the exciting, interesting, fun thing that you're making, instead of having to, the game crash or break, or something goes wrong because you didn't, or something that looks completely inconsistent with the quality that you're able to produce because you didn't have time to focus on it.
Yeah, sometimes you spend like a whole day just tweaking a menu and before you even manage to, and then you've wasted like half your time trying to even get the sort of the most basic UI into your game, and you're like, oh damn, now we have like 12 hours to do the whole thing. So it's like yeah, I think just where you can cut corners, because otherwise you're going to cut corners on the stuff that matters.
100%. And speaking on the, we're talking a lot about our kind of learnings in general, that kind of thing. It's probably worth talking about. Obviously, this is Global Game Jam 2023, and we, I think we both took part in Global Game Jam 2022 in various formats and that kind of thing. So what I wanted to have a quick chat about, because it's good to contextualize what we're sort of talking about, is what did you do last year in terms of Global Game Jam, in terms of Anything World as well. I know there were some cool games that utilized it. And what did you learn from specifically Global Game Jam 2022? So this time last year, that you're going to be bringing into this jam.
No, it was really awesome last year because so we had 3 teams eventually, and so we had a few of our developers spread between those 3 teams, and then we had sort of, I think for most of them we had like another coder or somebody who was like sort of on the coding side or the development side, and then we had like an artist and usually like a sound designer for each team, I think. Which was really cool because whenever you get to work with like sort of creatives from outside of like games development, whether they're like sort of concept artists or like people who do like music or like sound effects, like that's always like really elevates your elevates the product that you make, I think, out of a games jam. But so yeah, especially my team, with that's basically the team composition that we had, and we ended up making like a 2.5D sort of side-scrolling puzzle game. Like I've done a few 2.5D games before, so for me it was also something that I knew, and sort of I kind of had a few ideas for sort of like the bit generic sort of concept and sort of like maybe like the kind of mechanics behind it, and then sort of I let the rest of the team sort of really spearhead with what the kind of theming and the storyline and what kind of sort of visual look they really wanted. And so we ended up making this sort of like really interesting game with mechanics where you had like two characters, one walking below the ground and one walking above the ground, and you had different like levels. So you had kind of like we had like a shadow level below, and then a sort of light level below, light level above, sorry. And so you had to sort of like, you basically had the one set of controls controlling both those characters, and like with walls blocking and stuff, it made some really interesting puzzles where you had to like sort of like, it's sort of like a game that's been explored, the concept that's been explored quite a lot, sort of vertically. So you're having one controller with two sets of characters on each side, and then sort of interacting like that. And we sort of like kind of flipped the script slightly and put it laterally. And then so we kind of used all the art from our artist, who did some really amazing kind of background, and we used the layered background art that they made to kind of give depth to the level. And then we also had some custom sounds as well, made by our sound guy. So honestly, it was fantastic. And we were working right up until the deadline, but like it was a really rewarding experience. And one of my team actually ended up coming to work as a QA engineer at Anything World about a year afterwards. So that was really cool, because he'd been working in sort of QA before, but we sort of really got to sort of see him in action during the Games Jam, and he applied later on. So it was really cool to have him join our team. And then we also had two other teams, and one produced sort of like a 3D spaceship controller with sort of enemies and sort of a 3D kind of short game loop with sort of people coming towards you, kind of like 3D Space Invaders kind of adjacent. And then we also had what I call the game to audio visual experience pipeline happen on with the other team as well, where there was, I think, a gameplay concept, but a lot of level design occurred, and a lot of sort of sound design was there, and some story sort of people there who had some dialogue recorded, and some really cool stuff with like spatial audio and sort of walking through sort of a walking simulator type thing. It didn't turn out to have much of a game. There wasn't really a loss or a win condition, and there wasn't a game loop per se, but they made a really cool sort of walking sim sort of visual experience, which is kind of something that can happen if you're a bit optimistic with your scope, I think, is that you can sort of end up with not that much gameplay, but something that looks really cool, which I wouldn't consider a failure. I think is actually, I quite like it when that happens, because it really shows off like people's level design and sort of narrative design skills. I think that can happen. But yeah, that was kind of the three things that we got out of the 2022 Games Jam. But it was really awesome, and we had lots of like collaboration between the three teams as well. I came and sort of helped out a few of the other developers. We had one where like it was at like I think it was like 9 p.m. or something. One of the developers was like, "We've accidentally edited the same Unity scene," and if you've ever done that, you'll know that basically it causes a gigantic merge conflict that is basically impossible to solve unless you go manually through and resolve it. So yeah, that was really fun I had to unwind that with a few developers.
Fun is the word there.
Yeah, well, it's something that happened to me many times. So I was like, "Oh, you guys have fallen into the classic Unity pitfall." But
you activated Unity's trap card, absolutely.
It literally, I was like, you don't edit the same scene. You don't do that. If there's one thing I can give across to any new game developers who are going to do it this year, is if you're going to edit scenes, edit them separately and then combine them afterwards. Yep. Do not try and merge two Unity scenes
as much as you can, please. Please. Yes, the other thing was, so in terms of Anything World, then what were people using Anything World for in that sort of space?
So yeah, so in terms of a quick intro of what we do, is like we're basically delivering animated assets directly to the game engine through our API. So we have like a Unity integration. We also have an Unreal integration now as well. So basically it provides like the search engine that you can search. Like we have a huge catalog of existing models that are both like static and animated now. And basically what this allows people to do is bring in, like, instead of having to do like a huge amount of searching for like models, which used to be something that took forever when I was doing Games Jam when I was at university, and I wish I had this tool then. You can just go onto the Anything World panel, search kind of what you're looking for, browse different models, click on a button, it brings it directly into the game engine, and you can position it and prototype your level. Or if you need an animated asset, you can bring in animated assets that have some like predefined behaviors on them. So we have like sort of random movement behaviors and sort of some flocking and some like driving So it really makes it really easy to like sort of source models and like materials for your sort of game pretty much.
I should try
So
out then.
we kind of, yeah, it's we had really good feedback from the games jam
Mm,
when we were using the tool as well, because especially when it's like, I think it's useful in a lot of different situations, but especially in a games jam when like time is of the essence, like it just bringing stuff in just like really expedites it, especially
mm.
with the animated models, because I found it was always really difficult unless you had a specialist animator in your team. Finding models is hard enough, but then actually adding animations to them is like really difficult. Um, so actually what we also managed to do this time is we used our pipeline to animate someone's model that they had generated during the games jam. So
Mhm,
we had someone build a custom model, so a 3D
mhm, mhm.
modeler. They built a character and we passed it through the pipeline, and then it came up on the search panel like after like I think half an hour at that time. It might be a bit quicker now, but and yeah, and they could bring it directly into the scene.
Wow.
Um, the other thing that we also have is like with our API, we have sort of the database of models that we have is annotated with like keywords and tags, and also habitats and sort of like kind of what kind of behavior that you'd expect from this model.
Mm,
So I
mm.
think with the space scene, they use that API somewhat to bring in like sort of to be able to sort of like search and bring in like random models from like certain habitats, like for example a space habitat I think they searched for, and then like it returns like a sort of selection of different models, and they hot loaded those into the scene so that it would be like randomly generated if you each time that you played the game. I think there's
That,
probably more you could actually do with this kind of information, but maybe we can try it this year in 2023. But yeah, that's kind of
well,
the lowdown.
that's exactly it. I mean, this is the thing with well, it's a really powerful just tool for getting up to speed in terms of like trying stuff out, prototyping, and being able to iterate much more quickly on the things that you care about in terms of, depending on what you want to, if you want to see what the game looks like, iterate on it. It's a tool that's just going to let you do that so much faster. Really, kind of no matter what you're working on. And certainly last year we saw a lot of people doing that, which was really exciting to see. How people could use it to get creative with what they're doing. They got the game idea, they wanted okay, you're flying through space, you're doing this, you're doing that. Okay, well, we need this creature or we need this animal. Instead of it takes 20 minutes, half an hour. It can take a big chunk of time just searching for stuff, looking online, hoping it's there, and if it's not there, compromising on whether it's quality or, like you said, having to try and find an animator or an artist or someone to help make it. Whereas utilizing anything in the world, you can get yourself to that position where you're like, okay, I need this. There we go, that works, and it just makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, well, for us, it found that what actually was the biggest benefit of it was with our 3D, like with our level design and with our 3D model, our level designer was, I think, the same person on that particular situation. But basically, because he could get all of these assets, all of the kind of assets for the scene really quickly, it allowed him
Mhm.
to free up a lot of time to be able to like design the custom assets we really wanted. So he managed to get the bulk of the sort of prototyping or level design out, and then sort of be able to furnish it with all these kind of new assets that he designed from scratch, and then running it through the animation pipeline meant that we could get them animated within the time frame. So
Amazing.
I think that
Yeah.
was kind of the biggest benefit for us.
Well, that's really cool. And this is the thing, is that it's exactly like you said, it's being able to offload and offset and bring more people into the kitchen. That's the best metaphor I can come up with in terms of being able to actually experiment
Yeah.
and do things. What are you excited about them for from Anything World for this game jam? Are you there? Are you trying to test new things? Are you trying to push new areas? What are you excited about?
Yeah, a lot actually. So since last year, so last year we hadn't got our new animation system off the
Hmm.
ground yet. So we're using our legacy animation system.
Hmm.
So with our new animation system, we're using like the standard sort of clips-based animation that you'd come to expect from in Unity. And we have this huge library of these types of animations now. So we have lots of different animation categories. So we could like you can do a full walk, run, idle, jump cycle now. Whereas previously we only had sort of like walk animations, and they were done using the sort of physics joint space system in Unity,
Hmm.
which it did work, but there were some like sort of performance issues with that sometimes. So
Yeah.
this is like we've now transitioned to a pipeline that like a lot of people will be very familiar with. Additionally, we've got like new serialization options within the panel as well. So you can either use the default sort of animation controllers that we've programmed into the plugin,
Hmm.
or you can download and serialize those animation clips and bring them into your own You can bring them into the like sort of default Unity blend trees and like build out your own animation system. We also have completely overhauled the UI and the user experience for the panels as well, so they're a lot more performant now. So for me, I'm quite excited to use the new panel in the Games Jam, because previously there were some issues with like where we're using it, and like I'll take full responsibility for that. But there are a couple of issues. There are a couple of issues we discovered during the Games Jam. But with this new system, we've got a lot. So we've had a lot of QA, we've had a lot of iteration over the past year. So really excited to like show this like new stable animation system that we've got. And I think it's going to be a lot more sort of intuitive for users as well. So super excited to see what people can like produce.
That's awesome.
With these new animations, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a huge part of it, is that animation is an absolute skill, and being able to get access to some areas of that skill through anything well is going to be super powerful for our teams who want to try stuff out. And again, this takes all the way back around to sort of talking about creativity and freedom. It's that once you've got that idea, sometimes people get, especially when you're in that first game jam or you're early in your career, you get limited by what you think you can do. And so having access to these kind of things, being able to go, okay, well, what happened? I need this character who can do this, or this, or like you said, the run, jump, walk cycle, things that are standardized. But when you're new to it, you're trying to like, oh God, how do I do this? Having access to that kind of thing is going to be super cool. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing teams trying out Anything World in our site and experimenting with it, or some will take it on and take it integrate it into all of their game. Some might just use it for a couple of bits and pieces, but I think that's kind of the power of it, is that it's a toolbox. It's a toolbox that lets you access areas of game development that you may otherwise not be able to without particular skill sets or having people in your team. So yeah, that's gonna be really exciting to see. Really cool.
Yeah, we're opening up so that for the Games Jam as well, especially, we're going to allow people to, like, people can do this already now, but we're going to make sure that they're aware that they can give us models to run through our pipeline, and those animations, if they fit the categories that we currently have available, which is like some quadrupeds, bipeds, a couple of others as well, but if they fit the categories we currently have, we can run it through and have those animations, like have that model animated for them. So this is great for teams that don't have an animated but have a 3D modeler who wants to like bring their models to life quickly. And sort of with this new system, it makes it even easier to do that. So we'll be kind of on call to do that throughout the whole games.
Amazing.
Throughout the whole Global Games Jam.
Well, there you go. That's a great offer. And if you're in that situation when you're trying to think about how you can do stuff, even with your own characters, that offer is open to you. So creativity, super important. Don't push yourself too far. You have the opportunity to make something cool, and constraints are a good way to do that. But use the tools and the people around you to make cooler and more interesting things. And sleep. Sleep is important.
Always.
So Freya, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and Anything Worlds? Where can they find you online?
Oh yeah, go to our website, anything.world. There's a link to our Discord there, and if you pop into our Discord, we're here and super friendly and ready to chat about joining the Games Jam team or anything about games development or anything world really. So yeah, feel free to come and ask questions or chat.
Amazing. And you can find me at gamedev.london. We'll be here again same time next week with another episode of the Game Dev London podcast. Goodbye.